Dutch football has seen a dramatic rise in fan unrest. In 2023, Ajax against Feyenoord had to be abandoned, and images of the violence were beamed around the world. It was the most high-profile incident, but it was just the latest in a growing trend. But why? And who or what is really the cause? Though it has always been a feisty affair, and one that Ajax has tended to dominate in recent years. But this year was different. With Feyenoord 3-0 up, Ajax fans showed their disgust by throwing flares onto the field at the Johan Cruyff Arena in Amsterdam. And this was the second such stoppage in the game. The Dutch Football Federation, the KNVB, had recently brought in rules just for this occasion. If a match was stopped twice because objects were thrown onto the pitch, then the match would be abandoned. And so the referee called off the game. One of the most important games in the Netherlands is discontinued. So Jan van Hulst, Ajax's acting CEO. That's serious. Everyone is angry and sad because of this. But since the start of 2023, there have been dozens of examples of unruly fans stopping matches, attacking players, and generally being uncontrollable. In February, a 20-year-old PSV Eindhoven supporter punched Sevilla's Serbian goalkeeper, Marko Dimitrovic, in the face. In April, Ajax midfielder Davy Klaassen was cut when hit on the head by a lighter during a game against Feyenoord. In May, 150 AZ Alkmaar fans were arrested for anti-Semitic chants on their way to a game against Ajax. And in the same month, a battalion of hooded supporters tried to break into the away end during AZ Alkmaar's Conference League tie against West Ham United. Matches have been abandoned involving FC Twente, FC Utrecht, Go Ahead Eagles, and Sparta Rotterdam, among others. And the Dutch authorities and the Dutch press know who was to blame: the ultras. This no longer has anything to do with football and being a supporter, said Dilan Hizilgos Zagias, Minister of Justice and Security, after the Ajax game was abandoned. You play with the safety of the players, fellow supporters, and yourself. Shame on you. The country's Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, also weighed in. You don't touch players, coaches, and referees. What happened here is totally scandalous. The police and politicians have been left scrambling for answers to this 21st century moral panic, equating ultras with hooligans. In a country known for its pragmatism and rationality, how could groups like ultras and such extreme violence in football exist? And the government has threatened to ban all fans from the ground, whilst newspaper columnists have wondered which draconian measures should be imposed in response. The DASPO banning orders in Italy, for instance, which prevent anyone who's been accused of disorder around a stadium from attending games, forcing them to sign their names at the police station before, during, and after a match. Or the passive card system in Turkey, which links your ticket to your seat, where you are filmed by police and HD surveillance cameras. Now, while hooliganism has been curbed in both countries, it's been at the cost of stripping fan culture of much of its character. But the panic also misunderstands ultra culture. Whilst violence has long been adjacent to the scene, ultras can also inspire political and legislative change. They've played a role in resolutions and uprisings in Ukraine, Egypt, Serbia, Algeria, Turkey, and beyond. In Germany, protests largely organized by ultras successfully prevented pirate equity investment into the game. Ultras tend to reflect their environment and surroundings. Hooliganism, by contrast, places violence above all else. And the Netherlands had, in the past, a similar issue with English-style hooliganism. In fact, the hooligans of Dutch side ADO Den Haag were once considered the world's most ferocious. Famously, they burned down their own stadium in the 1980s when angered after a defeat. Now, ultras are the dominant and most visible football culture, attracting young people in large numbers, and politicians are happy to assume its responsibility for violence. But is there something deeper going on, which football stadiums are merely reflective of? For example, the Netherlands has seen a marked increase in political extremism, exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And politicians have been inundated with death threats following violent protests over everything from climate change policy to COVID laws to anti-refugee marches. The 2021 anti-lockdown protests took place in dozens of cities across the country, often turning violent and bringing together a collection of citizens who may not have stood on the same side of a protest before. Once lockdown ended, added impetus was given to a farmers' uprising against laws designed to make farming sustainable. These too have seen violent confrontations with the police, blockades, and the mass dumping of manure on highways as conspiracy theorists from around the world have been drawn in, believing the reforms to be part of a plot called the Great Reset, a multi-headed conspiracy that centers on the idea that global elites, under the cover of pandemic restrictions, are stealing land in an attempt to enslave humanity. The Dutch intelligence service, the AVID, has warned that so-called anti-institutional extremists are the biggest threat that the Dutch state currently faces, a wide-ranging term for a loose coalition of far-right and far-left activists, anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists that have found unlikely common ground thanks to social media. And when a general election was held last year, it was won by the populist far-right PVV and their firebrand leader, Geert Wilders, who wants to ban Islam and shut down mosques. The Netherlands is changing, and perhaps this whiplash populism is now being reflected in football too. As Matthias Kuning from the Dutch national fan group Supporters Collective Nederland told The Guardian, maybe you saw in society as a whole more anti-government sentiment. There was more polarization, and people maybe more have their own truth, so that there's a bigger chance that you're in a certain bubble with people who only think like you. It was highlighted in society, so you see it in football as well. A report from the Dutch police, released last October, blamed the violence in Dutch football on young fans, relatively new to the scene and therefore not on the authorities' radar, who held deeply anti-establishment views and were not scared of authority. Others have suggested that the explosion of violence is a logical consequence of coronavirus lockdowns, like shaking up a bottle of Coca-Cola and then opening the lid. So perhaps it's not the young people, all football fans who've changed. Perhaps it could be the surrounding society.